I'm Jono, and if you're new here, I do pencil drawings. So I get asked a lot of questions around drawing all the time on my Patreon and on my YouTube, ranging from technical questions to asking about my inspiration. And so I thought I'd make a video where I answer all of them in one place. Also, this video is sponsored by Squarespace, but I'll tell you more about them later. So the first question is, what kind of paper do you use and why do you wet your paper? I get asked this so much. The paper I use is Archer's Aquarel 300 gram hard press paper. I've experimented with a bunch of other papers and I found that this paper generally absorbs graphite the best. It helps me get really dark tones. It's just a fantastic paper. It's really robust and strong as well. I can really dig into it with an eraser or with graphite and the paper doesn't get damaged. The reason I wet my paper is because I buy it on a massive roll, and because it's so thick, it maintains that curve. It's really, really stubborn. So rather than waiting a couple days with heavy weights on top of it to try and flatten it out, I'll wet the paper with some tape on either side to get it really flat. It kind of pulls tight like a drum skin. If you're interested in that, you can check out a video here where I do a deep dive into how I wet the paper and why, what tools to use. I could dive deep into each of these, but just for superficial purposes, primarily use pencils, but then I'll also use blending stumps. This is for smudging pencils around. A roll of cotton wool, I'll make them into little buds like this to try and get more accurate things. Brushes, it's a much more subtle way of moving graphite around. A kneadable eraser, these are pretty much my favorite tool. They're really dynamic. You can get loads of different textures with them. Really good at erasing graphite. A Tombow Mono Zero eraser for erasing really fine lines, as well as a mechanical eraser for getting highlights out of areas that have already been really saturated with graphite. I also use a stencil, which I kind of designed, and it's very similar to a French curve, but I find it really useful in protecting areas of my drawing when I'm trying to go really dark with cotton wool and graphite powder. How long does a drawing take you? So this depends on the size of the drawing and the content of the drawing. So anywhere between a week or 2 weeks up to 2 to 3 months. The longest drawing I've ever done was Pupil that I drew over the course of a year for about 3 2-month stints. So in total it was about 6 months of solid drawing to try and finish that drawing, which was actually traumatizing. I'm still recovering from that drawing. But now I've gotten it down to about 2 months on average is what I take to draw like a large drawing. A side note to this is the planning phase for drawings is a whole another animal, and that takes weeks, if not months, to try and finalize before I can find something that I'm willing to dedicate that amount of time on drawing. How do you get dark backgrounds? So this is also something that I made a video on. I've explored so many different ways on trying to get dark backgrounds with graphite. Graphite is naturally a reflective medium, so the primary way of getting darker backgrounds was to try and reduce the reflection. One of the big things that helped is the paper that I work on plays a massive role in making my backgrounds more matte and a little bit darker. Then I started experimenting with turpentine, which I would just advise a lot of caution. Turpentine is super toxic, so have a well-ventilated room. If you're working with it, maybe use a mask. And then I started working with refined linseed oil. A lot of people have pointed out that linseed oil can rot paper, which it does, but if you're using artist refined linseed oil, the odds of it rotting the paper are a lot less. That rot is also just more of a yellow tone, which I often see at the back of my paper, but it doesn't affect the dark graphite areas where I've applied it. I think do your research, find out what kind of linseed oil you're using. Mixing that in with graphite can make it go really dark, but also practice with these things before you ruin your artworks. I've ruined artworks thinking that it would be easy to work with. It's really not easy to work with. You can't remove it once you've applied it. So just, yeah, please be careful, but that's how I get my really dark backgrounds. Where do you get your inspiration from? I actually don't really know how to answer this. I get my inspiration from pretty much everyday life. I'm constantly trying to think of ideas to draw and think of things that would stimulate me and that I'm willing to spend that amount of time on. It's often what I spend my time talking about with friends or with my team. Primarily the subject matter is around mental health. My thoughts are in picture form, so they kind of just come up and then I will try and analyze that and see how I can make that come to life in the form of an artwork or what might be a stimulating way to represent a feeling. It's not easy. I spend a lot of my time struggling trying to come up with concepts. And yeah, there's no hard and fast answer for that. Do you take your own reference images? So this is something I get asked quite a lot. I take all my own reference images and I compile them with Photoshop or Procreate or whatever I'm using at the time to try and get an idea of what the composition might be. This process takes a really long time as well. I'll arrange photo shoots with models or get props from a prop house or something and try and put everything together. Or if there's something that I can't shoot myself, I'll contact a photographer that I really admire whose work has inspired me, and I'll use something that they've shot as a reference. But I think it's important to build a relationship with everyone that you work with. How do you keep your proportions so accurate? So this is something that I've always felt a bit insecure about. I had this goal of being an artist that could just draw out of my head and would practice trying to do that. The reality is there are almost no hyperrealists that are just drawing completely out of their heads. So I work from reference photos and I use a grid method to try and keep my proportions intact. I think I'll make a video around the grid method and how I grid my reference photos and then my paper, which is also a whole thing that's developed over the years to try and have a grid that doesn't control me too much, that gives me a bit of freedom in my work. What I noticed is when you work off a really small or tight grid, your work slows down a lot. You might be a little bit more accurate, but the spin-off is that the time that you spend trying to be so accurate is just not really worth it. So trying to find a healthy medium is kind of the name of the game here. The next question we have is, why do you spray your pieces? So I spray my work with a fixative. This is just to prevent the graphite from smudging. It's a really easy medium to get damaged and to smudge, so this is just a layer of protection. This fixative called Gromboscher, I might be pronouncing that wrong. This is a really good one. It's an old fixative that people have used for a very long time, so it's been tested for a lot. Some fixatives can actually distort your tones and kind of ruin your work a little bit, so I'd experiment with fixatives. And the last question is, what's with all the gummy bears? I've always felt so heavy and dense in trying to create artworks that have some other meaning to me. Often the mindset or the thing that I'm exploring is kind of a negative one or a struggle of some sort. And so an escape from that whole creating like heavy work or thinking about heavy things all the time was to just throw a gummy bear onto an eyeball. I really love drawing eyes, and gummy bears are delicious, so it was just a nice playful way of me trying to break away from trying to produce like serious art or art that felt like it meant something to me. Inadvertently, I think the gummy bear drawing means a lot to me now because it represents like an escape from that headspace. Here we go. I hope you guys found this video helpful. Leave a like if you did, and let me know if you have any questions in the comments, but hopefully I answer most of them in this video. Before in this video, I just want to give a quick shout out to this video sponsor, Squarespace. I've been working with them for a couple of years now, and they've played a huge role in my career, not only in sponsoring these videos and helping me maintain this channel, but more importantly, early on I was looking for a way to showcase my work. If you're an artist or a creative, it's so important to have your work represented online to help clients get in touch with you and to find you. And for me, I felt that Squarespace just did that effortlessly. I never had to patch or upgrade anything. I could register a domain with them, or set up an online store, and most importantly, I could design a portfolio and show my work the way that I wanted to. Also, every time I got stuck, their amazing support team helped me out instantly. So if you're looking at building a website, give Squarespace a try. And if you decide that you love them, use the soft code and get 10% off your first purchase. I hope you guys found this video informative and helpful. Yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.